I'm the International Director for Business in the Community, and I'm joined here with Danielle Cox, who's the Programme Manager for this area of work. We are absolutely delighted to have you with us. Thank you for joining us for a webinar on the power of partnerships, creating impact for international disaster relief and resilience, where we hope to this morning or this afternoon to explore the power of those partnerships. And we have some fantastic speakers for you who will be able to share with you their experience. We've been doing a lot of work in this space over a number of years, and as you all probably realise, last year there were over 320 disasters in 2016, 190 or more of which were natural catastrophes and 136 or more made catastrophes. Total economic losses rose in 2016 from 94 billion in 2015 to 175 billion in 2016, illustrating again the incredible increase in need around the world and the frequency of these disasters. We've done a number of pieces of research over the years, and in our recent research, Business Unique Contribution, we asked NGOs and business what did they feel the role was of business in international disaster relief and resilience, and what support would they like to give and what support would they like to receive. A couple of quotes came through in some of that research, and we encourage you to look at the research. It's available free online, and we hope you find it useful. But in terms of that research, one of the quotes we drew out was an NGO talking about we need time and opportunity to discuss with business the effective ways of working in advance. If we're talking about an emergency has struck, after the emergency has struck, it is probably too late for anything to happen apart from financial support. Another quote which came out of the research was 76% of NGOs believe that business support is most effective when based on its core competencies, skills, products and services. 77% of businesses, however, struggle to understand how to best utilize their core competencies, skills and products. So this is a really interesting piece. NGOs and humanitarian aid agencies want it. Businesses don't know how to deliver it or how to make it relevant or useful. And 84% of NGOs preferred working with business in disaster relief reduction and resilience building. And over the next 5 years, almost 50% of businesses expect to increase their focus in this area. So these pieces of research that we have done are available online. This is in the Business Unique Contribution. And we've also prepared some guidance on addressing international disaster relief and resilience that gives the guidance for business. And again, we draw your attention to that and hope you'll find it useful. This webinar is the first of a series of webinars we'll be hosting. And this webinar is about the power of partnership and how can you create impact for international disaster relief and resilience. So as I say, we have some fantastic speakers to join us in just a few moments. But just a few housekeeping details. You will be muted in order to avoid disruption throughout the webinar, but please do ask questions to the panel, and you can do this by submitting questions through and press the hand icon, which you'll see on your screen. This allows you to type in the question and send them through, and we'll be able to see them and post them to pose them to the panelists. Also, we hope, and we hope you're all hoping with us, that all technology gremlins have been dismissed and everything will go very, very smoothly. But if you do have any problem or anything cuts out, please just use the hand icon to alert us and we'll try to rectify the problem for you. So without further ado, I would very, very much like to introduce our speakers. We have with us this morning or this afternoon Kate Gibson, who's from IHG. She's the Vice President of Corporate Responsibility for the Intercontinental Hotels Group. We have a last-minute change, and we thank Alex Harris, who is the Chief Executive of International Health Partners. Unfortunately, Walgreens Boots Alliance were unavoidably detained and have been unable to join us this afternoon. But Alex and the International Health Partnership has been a long-term partner of the Walgreens Boots Alliance Group, and will be able to talk very eloquently about their partnership. We're also delighted to have with us Claire Hitchcock, who is the GSK's Director of Global Health Programs. And she'll again be able to share insight of their approach, what they've learned, and how they see this program and their program developing. So I very much would like to welcome Kate Gibson to please talk to us about Intercontinental Hotels Group's approach to international disaster relief and resilience. Over to you, Kate.
Thanks very much, Sue, and thanks to everyone who's joined the call today. As Sue set up very nicely, this is obviously this agenda is something that is becoming more needed, and also the need and the complexity of it is certainly somewhere where companies working in partnership with other organizations in their sector, across sectors, and clearly with humanitarian agencies and other partners is going to be absolutely essential. So as Sue mentioned, I work at Intercontinental Hotels Group, and my role is Vice President Corporate Responsibility. And I also led the work to set up our corporate foundation, which is known as the IHG Foundation, which launched in February 2016, which will become relevant because that's how we channel our support for communities impacted by disasters. So I've got a few minutes here just to share our approach, why we do what we do, and how we work in partnership. And I'm going to focus in particular on one of the partners that we work with, which is CARE International UK. So a couple questions, I guess, just that I wanted to share with you. So in terms of our industry and our company, why this agenda is important for us is, I guess, a couple of reasons. Hotels do play a role in their communities as a hub. They are the center of their communities. They're places that people go to mark big moments in their lives, to celebrate, to enjoy themselves, but they are also a safe haven and a hub in times of disaster. And sadly, the events of this week in Manchester have yet again proven that that's needed, and also the role that hotels play in sheltering people as well. And I guess the other thing is that from a business continuity standpoint and a business success standpoint, hotels and their success is directly related to the resilience and the success of the community around it. No one wants to go and do business or visit a community that is in distress. So that's another area. So there's a real symbiotic relationship, and our global scale as a brand owner, as a franchisor, is quite extensive. So we have close to 5,200 hotels in almost 100 countries and territories around the world. It means that we need to be prepared for disasters because they do often impact our hotels both directly and indirectly, and that we do also need to be ready and able to reach out to communities around our hotels that are impacted by disasters to help them get back on their feet. And that's clearly relevant for us in terms of our colleague base, who are often living locally. And we do know that when disasters strike, we have physical damage to our hotels in some cases. We have colleagues that have damage to their homes, themselves and their direct families are impacted, or they're not able to reach their homes. And then we do obviously know that in the communities around our hotels, there's often very significant impacts as well. So it's relevant for us from a business continuity standpoint as well as from a wider community outreach standpoint. And we've been focused on this for some time. We have a long history of responding to disasters that dates back many decades. We formalized our approach in 2011 in terms of delivering a bit of consistency in terms of the way that we help to advise our hotels, help ensure they're prepared for disasters, and also guiding our response so that we're able to respond very quickly, that we have the right touch points internally in order to ensure that response, and that we have the right partners to work with. Now, alongside formalizing that approach, we established a strategic partnership with CARE, and we've been working with them ever since. The way that we work with them is in a few different ways. We provide annual unrestricted funding to the CARE Emergency Shelter Team, which is based here in the UK, and provides expertise as a center of excellence for the wider CARE network. It allows them to develop best practice in terms of disaster preparedness, response, and disaster risk reduction for the CARE network. And it also enables us to tap into that best practice as well for IHG and for the communities around our hotels. Working with CARE, we've developed guidance for all hotels operating under our brand, so all 5,200, in terms of how to think about preparing for disasters and how to respond to take care of guests, to take care of colleagues, and also the wider community. And we've also increasingly worked with CARE to understand key emerging trends in terms of disasters. We just had a workshop with them about 3 weeks ago where we looked all across their knowledge base in terms of what they see out there. We had members of our risk management and our security teams also involved, looking from our standpoint at what we see across our hotel estate. And we were trying to identify a subset of locations where there is greater risk of disaster, and to really understand what are the key features of those locations and how can we best be prepared and respond. The other way that we work with CARE in disaster relief is we provide grant funding for CARE to help communities when they are impacted by disasters. A few, I guess, recent examples of how we've worked with them. In Nepal in 2015, in the aftermath of the earthquake, we have a hotel in Kathmandu with a large number of colleagues that were very impacted. IHG provided support for them, and we provided support for CARE to enable them to help the community. We provided a grant recently to CARE for the communities in the Central Philippines impacted by Typhoon Haiyan, and we provided a grant for those communities to help with disaster preparedness for future disasters. We also recently worked with CARE on a workshop in Bangkok, bringing together their emergency shelter practitioners so that they could meet face-to-face in order to share best practice in terms of disaster preparedness. And then we've also recently supported CARE in Chennai in India, which is a part of the world that we've responded to several times now, so there's definitely a pattern there. And we provided support for CARE India to replenish their stock of materials so it could be pre-positioned to respond to future disasters. So that's just a bit of a flavor about the way that we work with CARE. We do also work with other partners in other geographies. So in the Americas region, for example, where we have a lot of hotels, we also work with the American Red Cross, and we have a partnership with them to respond to disasters as well. In terms of what we've learned, I guess in working in partnership, what we really value about the relationship that we have with CARE is the very open and honest and long-term relationship. We partner with them because they were interested in a strategic partnership that was not solely about cash donations. It was about developing and sharing best practice and really having very close connections to help both CARE and IHG. Understanding the organizational structure and the way that each partner works and actually how you get things done in organizations is very important, because every organization, particularly large international ones, operate very differently, and actually getting things done, getting messages out, getting things to happen is often a very complex business. So taking the time to really understand that is something that we found very effective. Going with the grain of your business model and the way your business is structured is something that I would strongly recommend. It's particularly relevant for us because we're a franchise business, which means that of the 5,200 hotels under our brands, we only own and directly control 8 of those hotels, and the vast majority are owned by third parties and run by third parties. So in order to make things happen on the ground, our agenda and our working model is very much around influence as opposed to direct control. So really helping CARE understand the way that we work was very important. And CARE itself operates a federated structure as well. So they have their own organizational dynamics, and really understanding how each organization works is very, very important. Similarly, being honest and open about what you can and cannot provide is very important. And that's particularly true, I would say, in disaster preparedness, which is something that is a growing agenda for us, as it is for many companies, given the growing incidence of disasters. And just being realistic about what you can commit to up front in a world where it's just very unclear how a disaster is going to unfold, where it is, what our hotel presence looks like on the ground, and the various connections that are in place. Just being realistic up front and allowing yourself to be flexible. And then on that front, involving the wider business to make sure that you can unlock and tap into the in-kind support, which is something that the BITC research has definitely identified, and also help you have rapid response. Certainly one thing that we have done with CARE, and we've seen it work very effectively, is in the higher risk locations, we've put local care personnel in touch with our general managers on the ground in advance of a disaster. And that's certainly based on learning we've had from previous attempts in terms of preparedness, which have been more centrally controlled. And our view is that those local connections are important because you never know what's going to be going on. It's very difficult to plan for exactly what would be needed. But if the right people have spoken in advance, they can get on the phone and they can very quickly figure out what can be provided. And we've seen that work very effectively in Nepal in advance of the earthquake. We've seen it work very effectively in the Philippines as well. And it's a model that we're rolling out to a number of other locations. So that's just a few learnings from our side. If you'd like to find out about anything more in terms of our disaster relief agenda, we have our responsible business report, which is on the IHG PLC website, and it's updated every year. And there are other stories as well. And then our disaster response work for local communities, as I mentioned before, is through the IHG Foundation, which you can find as well online. Thanks very much.
Kate, thank you so much. That's fantastic. It's amazing what you can fit into just 10 minutes, and I hope you've really whetted the appetites of the audience there. It's such fantastic insight, and we'll have time for questions after each of at the end of the presentations. So if we can encourage you, as you've heard from Kate, to think about your questions and send your questions through, that would be great. But meanwhile, we'll move on to Alex. Alex, thank you so much, as I say again, for stepping in at the last moment here. We are really grateful for you joining us and for you to be able to share with us the partnership that you have with Walgreens Boots Alliance. Alex, over to you.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the invitation. And what I hope to do in the 10 minutes that I've got is, as you say, talk a bit about our relationship with Walgreens Boots Alliance, but also maybe try and draw out some learnings that we've had, not just from that partnership, but from a number of the corporate partnerships that we're operating. And I guess most of you won't know what my organization does, so I'd like to just quickly introduce the work that we do, and then let's sort of dive into some of the learnings. So International Health Partners is a not-for-profit that's focused on delivering access to medicine. So all of you hopefully are living in places where you can readily access the medicine that you need, but in many parts of the world, easily treatable diseases can mean chronic pain, poor quality of life, or perhaps even a death sentence. And we're really committed to working hard to change this reality. So we help people in hard-to-reach, vulnerable and disaster-hit communities get better access to medicine. And specifically how we do that is to coordinate the safe and responsible donation of healthcare products from over 100 companies around the world to where the needs are greatest, so that people don't have to suffer needlessly from treatable illnesses. As many of you will doubtless be aware, Walgreens Boots Alliance is a health and well-being enterprise whose purpose is to help people across the world lead healthier and happier lives. So to those who've already mentioned this point about synergy and making sure that what you do is aligned with your business purpose, that would tend to sort of reiterate that. IHP started working with WBA in 2005, initially through the wholesale business, and I think the synergies were very clear on both sides, and I'll say a little about what those are, but I guess at its root they have access through their different business units to medicines all around the world, and we have the expertise to help get them safely, efficiently and effectively into the disaster zones and ensure that the distribution in country is done well. So very briefly, the initiative that we're involved in with WBA is largely focused around times of disaster and conflict. So in the health space that we occupy, it's very common to find very fragile supply chains, unfortunately high levels of counterfeit medicines, and an infrastructure often, in the case of the Nepalese earthquake, which has been destroyed. All of these things combine to make it very difficult for people to access the essential medicine that they need. So since 2005, we've been working with the wholesale business, the retail business, the pre-wholesale business inside WBA to enable a rapid access to essential medicines for vulnerable men, women, and children. And this program has focused on our supply of emergency health kits, which are provided by staff within the business of WBA, and I'll go into a bit more detail about how they do that. But what it means is that we can provide those agencies who are distributing or treating patients on the ground the access to the essential medicines that they need in a very timely fashion. And I'll come on also to talk about our move towards disaster preparedness and pre-positioning. So the problems that this partnership addresses is really the lack of access to medicine at the time of a disaster or conflict, but clearly there's a need in many of these places which are disaster prone to build the resilience as well. As far as, I obviously can't speak on behalf of WBA, but our experience of partnering with them is that the reasons that they are continuing to build and deepen their partnership with IHP are several. So firstly, that alignment with what their business purpose and the aims of the Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations is very clear that they can use their skills and knowledge to drive a purpose that goes beyond just profit. Secondly, the ability to engage their employees and for their employees to also provide some support means that their involvement makes the initiative gets closer to home. Thirdly, that particularly the way that we work with them, our program improves their relationships across their supply chain. So as a business that relies on manufacturers of medicines, they're able to tell their story about what they're doing and how they're partnering with us to bring better access to medicine in places of need. And that enables them to talk more about the work that they're doing with customers and manufacturers and bring some leverage to those relationships. And I think that we find that very beneficial for the kind of collaborative partnerships that we're trying to build. And then finally, the opportunity for WBA to influence and promote best practices around their network and ours, I think, is something that's very attractive to them. So I want to just perhaps spend the second half of my time giving some really simple pointers, and I hope these are helpful, and some of them, I guess, stating the obvious. But for me, the key one has already been said, which is the knowing your why. So I'm sure we can all articulate why our organizations exist, but does your disaster strategy align with that purpose? So going where the expertise and the energy is certainly the right strategy. Not all businesses obviously provide goods or services that are appropriate to the needs of international disasters, but many do. So again, starting where you have expertise and existing resources which are needed is a good strategy. And this could involve perhaps people skills. It could mean, as has already been discussed, financial support, or maybe it's goods that are needed that you have within your business models and supply chain. The area that we occupy as an intermediary and as a coordinator and facilitator of corporate partnerships is really focused on knowing who your partner should be and also who your beneficiaries are. And this might sound like a simple question, but are you armed with enough information about your beneficiaries that you're confident you know exactly what they need and that what you have to offer is what they need? And I was really struck by what Kate was saying about connecting their local staff with the local staff within Care International, because that intelligence gathering and information linkage on the ground is really, really important. And for us, what we see is that where those relationships have been created, corporates make much better decisions about whether to respond or not. So the gathering of the information is really key, and I'm sure that's why networks like BITC and others are an invaluable source of intelligence gathering. I would also note that every disaster is different. So it may be possible to strike up a single partnership, such as the one that IHG has with care, but clearly, as they've recognised, there are occasions when you may need to be flexible and find somebody else who may be better placed on the ground. So in the case of international health partners, we prefer to work through the World Health Organization and the Health Cluster, and we believe that that's the most efficient and effective way to ensure that there's no duplication of efforts on the ground. However, in some disasters, the World Health Organization may be under-resourced or ill-prepared to take that leadership role, and so one of the tasks that we undertake on behalf of our corporate partners is to assess each disaster on its own merits, as it were, and advise our corporate partners about the most effective in-country distribution methods. So whoever you're working with already or are planning to work with, make sure that you use their expertise to make the right choices about how to respond. The other thing perhaps to mention is about aiming for quality, not just quantity. So we believe the best way to avoid disasters is to work with communities to build their resilience. So in our space, in access to healthcare, that's about pre-positioning those essential medicines within the supply chain. And clearly that's a task that requires a lot of determination, certainly more planning than just responding at the time of a disaster, but it can also create huge value for your business and the beneficiary community. So we're working hard with a number of corporate partners, and WBA is at the forefront of the work we're doing to move towards pre-positioning that access to essential medicines. So the quality of the response that we can provide together in partnership means that in-country actors have a much higher level of confidence and certainty over the kind of support they'll be able to access and receive. And in particular, where goods are a part of the response, which is the area that we're involved in, that really translates to lives being saved so that those products can be accessed as soon as possible. And I can say with great confidence that the work that we've done together with WBA has really been very well received by World Health Organization, UK government, in DFID and others, who are looking at ways of building resilience in country. And I just want to very briefly, perhaps 1 minute, talk about a live example of work we're doing in the Middle East at the moment with WBA amongst a number of other corporate partners, where we're supporting the needs of Syrian refugees and displaced people across Iraq, Lebanon and Yemen. And in this intractable crisis, I think there's understandably a lot of donor fatigue and questions that people have about risks of creating dependency. We've been able to deliver about 2.5 million treatments in the region, but we've also worked very hard to engage the local government to see what we can do to help them build resilience in their supply chain, so that when they reach a point where they're able to stand on their own feet, we've strengthened and built capacity and enabled something more lasting to take place. Because obviously in lots of disasters it's chaotic, it's fragmented, and good partnerships between corporates and international and local partners can help cut through that disorganization and bring some structure to the response. And in the case of Iraq, we're now working with the local government, UN agencies and others to ensure that they all have access to our pre-positioned emergency health kits, which are put together as a voluntary effort by staff from the WBA, different businesses. And we're really making sure that we're not duplicating efforts on the ground. Perhaps finally, a few thoughts about what else is important in a good partnership. So we've talked a little bit about collaboration. That's something that's close to IHP's heart, because we really believe there are efficiencies in working together. Secondly, risk stating the bleeding obvious, but don't respond if there isn't a need. And so, we take first do no harm as one of our core principles. That make sure that you and your partners are familiar with the capabilities that exist already within the country, so that we're not sending or offering anything that's inappropriate. And perhaps as a final point, I really want to encourage you that in the years that I've been involved in this space, I've really seen a change and openness to the role of private sector, and I'm sure that you're all very familiar with that. And so I want to encourage you that there's that increased openness gives a real opportunity for corporates to play a leading role in a holistic sort of whole person solution that enables a much better response to disasters and certainly helps to build that resilience in country. Thanks for your time.
Alex, thanks very much. That's fantastic. And you're quite right. We've seen over the years, we've been doing some research over the years in terms of corporate understanding and interest in this area, and the humanitarian aid agencies' reception for corporates supporting in this area. And we've seen a stark development there, which is fantastic to see. And of course, it's absolutely aligned to the amount of need that's out there, given the number of disasters that are happening, man-made or natural. So that was a fantastic contribution, Alex. Really, really appreciate it, and a great outline and overview of your work and the work you do with WBA. So thank you very much for that. So moving on now, we'd like to invite Claire Hitchcock, who is the Director of Community Partnerships, Europe and Emerging Markets and Global Health Programs at GSK.
Thank you very much for Alex and Kate's insights. Really appreciate that. And what I'm going to do is to give an overview of our strategy for humanitarian and emergency response, and talk a little bit about what we have done in Syria as a case study, and then share with you some insights. But I just want to illustrate our approach to global health, because I work in GSK's global health team, and we focus on four key pillars, which are to combat tropical diseases, reduce child mortality, strengthen healthcare capacity, and increase access to medicines. And we work in over 84 countries, and these programs reach over 500 million people. That's, so it's a really large-scale work. But our humanitarian programs underpin all those areas. And what we do through our humanitarian programs is to follow some key principles. So the first principle is preparedness. Next slide, please. The first principle is preparedness. The second one is aligning our programs to access to healthcare. And GSK's mission is to enable people to do more, feel better, and live longer. And the access to healthcare piece is critical to that, as is putting the patient first. Next slide, please. So you will have heard from Alex and Kate, because emergencies and humanitarian situations are so complex, we can't do it alone. And we work with a number of, a small number of carefully selected organizations with long-term partnerships, and these include Save the Children, Americares, Project Hope. And what they do is to work with us on the preparedness and delivery of programs. Next slide, please. And the nature of our programs really cover some areas which includes cash. So last year, GSK contributed over £1 million for emergencies, and we have a pot of money internally that we can utilize at very short notice. So we also have an internal decision-making process that means that we can get approvals within hours for cash to support activities, because we know that that's really needed. Alex talked about their program in IHP around providing medical services and medicines, and that's a key part of what GSK does, is to provide much needed and life-saving products like antibiotics to our partners who have them ready in their warehouses to release as soon as an emergency happens. And I just really can't overemphasize how valuable that program is, not just for GSK, but for our partners, because they mobilize in such acute emergencies that some of GSK medicines are first to arrive in those countries. And we also provide technical expertise, and that includes research and development, as well as involving our employees. So a big focus on encouraging our employees to contribute to emergencies through fundraising, but also their skills. And in the case of Typhoon Haiyan, we had a colleague who worked with Save the Children for 2 weeks to help restore the supply chain. And in the Ebola crisis, we had 2 GSK scientists who volunteered their time to go and work as bench scientists in Sierra Leone. And last year, we responded to 10 major emergencies and delivered 70 consignments of humanitarian aid, and we reached 60 countries. Next slide, please. But I wanted to say a little bit about what we've done for Syria, because I think it does illustrate GSK's strategy for humanitarian response. So we have been working and supporting the crisis in Syria since 2012, and that was initially through supplying medicines through Americares and direct relief through the pre-position program. But as the situation got worse and more people were fleeing, we decided to take a strategy that addressed healthcare needs for Syrian refugees across their journey. So that's working on programs within Syria, across the countries in transition, and what we call the country of destination. And through our partnership with Save the Children, we were able to fund things like mobile health units, mother and baby centres in places like Croatia, but also to set up a vaccination programme within Syria to vaccinate children, a cohort of children between the ages of 1 and 5 who had not received their measles vaccination. So it's really important in protecting children from measles and developing what we call the herd immunity. And Save the Children mounted that campaign with some amazing medical staff within Syria. So you can imagine it actually required hospitals within Syria, the doctors, but also UNICEF and others to make sure that they were able to protect those children. But also, because we were working across the, as we call it, across the journey, we realised we needed to find new partners as well. So as well as scaling up our work with the Red Cross, we forged a new relationship with the United Nations Agency for Refugees, because they have that expertise. But we also worked in Jordan as well with the Royal Jordanian Health Society. And at that local level, along with the government in Lebanon and in Turkey, those governments have really done such incredible work providing protection for refugees in their countries at their cost as well. So where we can help to offset some of those costs, GSK has had a commitment to support that. And in Jordan, particularly within the big refugee camp there, we are delivering with Americares workshops and education programs for people with non-communicable diseases. So there's a lot that's going on for Syria in terms of the way that that whole situation is evolving, and I would say that our strategy does evolve not, I mean, at one stage it felt like it was evolving day by day, but I mean, it's much longer term now. And from a business point of view, we've also announced our commitment to provide one of our vaccines called Synflorix, which protects against pneumonia at the lowest cost. And that lowest cost is available to civil society organisations so that they are able to protect refugee communities through their own immunisation programmes as well. So it's, again, just to show that yes, we've done a lot of work around philanthropy, but we've also looked at how we can evolve our business model to address those healthcare needs. Next slide. And then finally, I want to kind of really encourage everybody to really make use of the resources that are available, particularly those that have been developed and disseminated by business in the community. And it's so important that we do utilise these resources so that we can forge good partnerships, but also find ways of influencing governments so that we don't just have to be reactive, that we can do much more in the longer term to invest in long-term programs that really help to mitigate and build resilience. And I was really proud to have been invited to join the World Humanitarian Summit, and that was, you know, through business in the community. They helped to support that. And you know, the key things coming out of that summit were much better acknowledgement of the role of the private sector in emergencies, and that, you know, that is certainly you know, a key action coming out of it. But also, and both Kate and Alex have really emphasised this, localisation. I think that is going to be our mantra, which is, yes, we can have something, you know, we need to have the global platforms, but it's what happens, how we connect up within our local countries and our business units there, with employees, with the supply chain, to work at that local level with responding and supporting communities with a whole range of you know, resources. So I think a big lesson that we're all going to, you know, that we're all echoing is that these partnerships take time. You need to work at them, and there are so many good organisations out there working on this that you know, I just really encourage people to think widely about who they want to work with and the way that they want to conduct that really is aligned to their business strategy. And I think with that, I conclude my presentation.
Claire, thank you very much indeed. That's fantastic. That's really helpful, and I think really sets the scene. Together, the three of you have really given a great illustration of the various ways in which business are supporting international disaster relief and resilience. And as you say, Claire, and indeed Kate, it's important to spend time building the partnership, identifying the organisation that you want to partner with, spend time developing that partnership, spend time identifying the resources and products and services that you can support with that are in line with the need, and the importance of understanding that need. And the localization of these things is absolutely vital, as we all have, and we will all know of so many examples where stuff is sent to a particular disaster environment which is completely unnecessary, unneeded, and a waste of resources. And I think actually if we spend more time, and as you've all said, you have spent time absolutely understanding how to do this simply faster and better. So hats off to all three of you, and thank you very much for your support there. Now, the next thing we're going to do is to ask questions. Have we got any questions? We do know that we've got a couple of questions in the line. If you haven't posted your questions yet, please do. But one of the questions that we've had that's come up is, both IHG and GSK, you both spoke about the evolution of your offer in response to disasters through your partnerships. How did you engage in those conversations with your partners? And more importantly, how did you share those changes with your boards to ensure continued buy-in to your strategy? We seem to have lost contact for a second. So, Claire, Kate, would you like to respond to that?
Sure, it's Kate here. Can you hear me?
Yes, got you. Thank you very much.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think very quickly from our standpoint, I think the evolution of our partnership with CARE was a relatively gradual one, and it was very much built on the learnings of from our initial focus on disaster response. And then it was very much a mutual thing. So once we'd been working with them for, say, a year in terms of responding to a large number of disasters, we were able to spot trends, and CARE's expertise was also very helpful here in looking at longer-term trends in terms of areas that are repeatedly hit with disasters. And that fueled some of the focus on disaster preparedness. And then we also started engaging more widely internally, so there was a lot more contact with our business continuity and our risk and security teams alongside ourselves with CARE, which also helped to widen that. And then we did some workshops over the sort of big set piece workshops to really look at what we learned and really figure out, okay, let's go through how disasters emerge kind of almost hour by hour, and let's map the ways that hotels can help in an in-kind way, and then let's have a very open, honest discussion about how our organizations work respectively and where is the best place to link these people up, if that makes sense. So it was a combination of gradual evolution and a few set-piece sessions, if you will, that we then tested different roads, because we had a hypothesis that local connections were better, and we were able to test that. And then in terms of ongoing support from IHG, we have a committee of our main board devoted to our wider corporate responsibility efforts, which we've kept informed, both of the learnings from what we're doing and also in terms of our shift, particularly into disaster preparedness, which was very helpful as well.
Okay, and it's thanks, Kate. And I mean, I think for GSK, our evolution was, was not even triggered, but evolved because we were scaling up our strategy for improving access to healthcare. And I think that when that means, changing our business model to make GSK products available to the poorest communities. And we also introduced some programs in the world's poorest countries. For example, we reinvest 20% of our profits made in the world's poorest countries to invest in frontline health workers. Now, those countries like Sierra Leone and Liberia have, we run programs there, but they are also prone to other natural disasters or conflict. So we already have a presence in those countries, and our scale up for humanitarian was to kind of build on the work that we're already doing in those countries. So it was part of our strategy for access to health and medicines, as well as our philanthropic work to invest in better resources and healthcare systems. And that strategy is backed by a global health advisory board that is represented by GSK's most senior management, our corporate executive team. So they also endorse our scale up and the work that we do in the world's poorest countries to improve access to healthcare. I hope that's given a sense of how it's evolved.
Brilliant. Thank you both very much for that, because I think that the message that you're both giving is it takes time, and the evolution is a slow and steady evolution, and it's so important to keep your executives informed of what you're doing and continually backing what you're doing. So thank you very much indeed for that, and it's much appreciated. A question I also we've had come up is, so some humanitarian agencies, and so this one particularly for you, Alex, some humanitarian organisations are still inclined to seek money and support above any other kind. And what tips actually do all three of you have for businesses who are finding it difficult to articulate the value of their offer in a humanitarian crisis? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I recognise that. I observe that in some other NGOs. I think it is depending on the model of the potential partner or the existing partner who's approaching you. Some of the models of disaster relief are not very flexible, and so actually it's much less hassle for them to just ask for some cash. However, I think I've heard both the other speakers say that what engages often you in a longer term partnership is where you're able to offer something that's actually related to what your business does, and so that alignment is really key. Certainly, you know, money oils the machines of disaster response. I think it's really quite simple. It's going through an exercise to really understand, is what your business does and has of value, and if it isn't, maybe you've got the right partner, and maybe cash support is the way forward, or maybe you need to look for a different partner. But I think that having a really good internal debate about what you have and is that what is needed is really key in this instance.
Thank you. And Kate, Claire, any thoughts to that?
I guess one thing, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
One thing I would say that was very helpful from our side is following the internal debate, which I completely agree with, is also working with your partner to try and think a little bit laterally. Because I think sometimes it's less about stuff and it might be about capabilities. So actually going through the disaster cycle, you know, in quite a lot of detail, especially if you're relatively new to the agenda. To give you an example, some conversations we've had around what a hotel can provide, there's the obvious things like rooms or food, beverage, you know, shelter, if you will. But a few other areas that sort of emerge from some of these discussions around saying, well, humanitarian agencies need, when they're deploying, need to scale up very rapidly. So they need to recruit and interview large numbers of people in a short space of time, for example. So hotel meeting rooms and our capability in terms of HR, for example, could be useful. So it's just an example, and I know in a professional services context, in other discussions I've been in along with Sue, is, you know, thinking a bit laterally about capabilities you might have in terms of legal expertise, in terms of contracts, in terms of negotiating procurement. There's a whole host of capabilities that a business might have that could be useful, but it's really just working with the right partner to kind of unlock that.
And thank you, Kate. And I think, Kate, if you wouldn't mind, we talk a little bit about the time when we were talking together with BT and Vanuatu. It might be an interesting one to illustrate as well, because the bilateral relationships between business to help facilitate a mobilization is also very important and interesting to think laterally.
Yes, you're right, and we've been talking about you know, collaboration across industries, and it was a bit opportunistic, but yes, there was in response to a disaster in Vanuatu a few years ago, it was in 2015. We'd been talking to BT about how we might be able to collaborate, because they deploy both from a business continuity standpoint and from a community standpoint a team of individuals who help reconnect the communications infrastructure, which is obviously very vital. And we've been talking about that, and they were hesitating about whether or not to deploy this team because of cost and various other aspects. And we were responding to that disaster as well. We had a resort that was very heavily damaged, and we had care personnel sheltering in the hotel itself during the disaster. And we were able to help facilitate their journey out through providing some hotel rooms to them. So it was a good example of just sort of connections that had been made, the right people having chatted in advance, because you can just pick up the phone and say, hey, are you responding? Yes, we're responding. What are you seeing? What do you need? Oh, maybe we can help. So quite opportunistic, but it definitely echoes the point around having had the conversation in advance.
Thanks very much, Kate. So as we draw to a close for this webinar, thank you very much indeed for all of you who've been listening and sending in questions and responses, and to you, Kate, and to you, Claire, and to you, Alex, for joining us and really sharing some great insight into the partnerships that you have been responsible for and have been evolving over time. And just to reiterate that there is a lot of resource out there to help and support organisations, many other pieces of work apart from our own, but we would draw your attention to the guidance that we spent a long time researching to make sure we could really help companies think about how could they better engage in international disaster relief and resilience, how we could help you if you're an NGO, increase their relevant support to really build a much better and greater support from corporates to support the need. So these things can be found on our website, and you'll see more about this over time, but these things are very much there and available. And there's also some good research which will help you as companies and you as NGOs to build the business case as to why you should take action. Because there are a number of companies who are quite reticent or aren't quite sure how to make the case. This research and guidance will help you do that. The guidance in particular also has case studies of the approaches that different companies have taken in different situations. So we hope you find that useful. And just to give you a heads up, we have been developing over the last couple of years something called the Global Relief and Resilience Hub. And this is a hub that looks to identify the types of resources, skills, capabilities, expertise, products and services that corporates can bring and offer to support international disaster relief and resilience, and capturing the sorts of need that NGOs have. And if we, in the spirit of pre-identifying, pre-positioning, pre-organizing, because you need to do all of this in advance of a disaster in order to be most effective, this hub will enable that to happen through an app. We'll be launching that in July, and we look forward to engaging all of you and inviting all of you to participate in that. And we hope it helps support the development and the engagement and the further impact of corporates in line with the needs of humanitarian aid agencies and communities around the world. So on that note, once again, thank you very much indeed for participating in this webinar. We look forward to being in touch with you for the next webinar, and also to seeing you in various events over the course, and talking to you at various events over the course of the next few months. Thank you very much, Kate. Thank you very much, Claire, and thank you very much indeed, Alex, and thank you, Danielle, and my team, who's been organising this too. We are very grateful for you and wish you a very happy Friday. Goodbye.